Feminism is on the rise lately, and part of it is directed at the treatment of women in entertainment media. I will not mention examples of social justice warriors or whatever happened on Gamergate. I will only talk about the issue on a purely academic level. Let's start by stating the obvious. Human history is almost entirely filled with men doing wars, constructions, politics, and religious teachings, while women stayed home, cooked food, and raised children. This began to change once technology advanced enough to start replacing manual labor. During the Industrial Revolution, machines began to be automated, which allowed advanced civilizations not to regard brute strength that important anymore. A machine gun can be equally deadly in the hands of both someone who is strong and someone who is weak. There were, of course, lots of women throughout history who achieved a lot of things, and the movement of equal rights predates the Industrial Revolution, but those cases involved women which were born or married into power, and not the everyday woman of the average middle class. So once the stereotypical image of the gender roles began to fall apart, came the big question: how exactly are men and women supposed to behave in a world that doesn't have gender roles? Oh sure, on paper that sounds very simple. They will both have equal chances in employment, they will both do housework, they will both take part in the raising of the children, and so on and so on. But it's not that simple in practice, is it now? It's not simply the prejudice of most men who don't see women as equally capable to do man's work. It's also how there are many differences in how male and female bodies work. It's not simply limited to the genitalia, okay? The hormones a male body produces are very different from the hormones a female body produces. They changed considerably, not just the way the body matures with age, but also the way the brain functions. When men say they don't understand women, it's not prejudice, nor something that happened because they were playing with plastic guns as kids, while girls played with dolls. Such things are promoting gender roles, but they are not solidifying them. It's because they think differently. This issue becomes even more apparent in fiction. Since fictional characters are almost always caricatures of archetypes, they have very few features that define them, and said features are usually presented in very extreme ways. As such, the differences between men and women are multiplied because they are created out of stereotypes in their purest of forms. There are lots of ways to categorize characters, but for the purposes of this topic, I will limit them to being either active or passive. The traditional gender roles expect from a man to be dynamic, active, offensive. A woman is supposed to be the opposite of that: timid, passive, kind. Which is why, traditionally, women in fiction are damsels in distress that are incapable to fend for themselves and need a man to save them or help them out in whatever problems they have. Since most fictional characters are two-dimensional, the only thing you can change in this model is to reverse the roles. And this is why we get the stereotypical fuss of having a wimp male surrounded by tsunderes and yanderes. And notice here the way most of the audience will react to these four different types. Dynamic man? Cool. Wimp man? Pitiful. Gentle woman? Likeable. Offensive woman? Obnoxious. See, traditionally you get the exact opposite reaction, and it gets messier in how a dynamic woman is supposed to be dressed. If timid and gentle girls are supposed to wear modest clothes because they don't make an exhibition of their gender, what are dynamic ones supposed to wear? Most men confuse liberated with slutty, because the more skin a dynamic woman shows for having more freedom in motion during action scenes, the more men will focus on her boobs and ass, making this a case of misplaced objectification. But when a man shows too much skin, no sir, that is not objectification, that is a display of prideful manliness. A contradiction. Come to think of it, most of this fuss comes down to how much skin somebody is showing, or what the outlines remind you of. Hey, look at that robot that looks like a woman. It is sexual. Doesn't matter that it doesn't have a gender or even female organs, all that matters is that it looks like a woman. Sex symbol. Basically, we let prime instincts to affect our judgment considerably, to the point anything that shows a skin or the outline of a human figure is immediately translating to sexual stimulation, courting, seduction, or subjugation. And it is very easy to overlook whatever themes the story may be about, or what ideals a character is actually representing. In other words, the whole objectification fuss has to do with being superficial as hell. The best way to have modesty when it comes to gender equality is to show as less body figure as possible, have women doing the exact same things as men, and to keep romantic relationships as subtle or platonic as possible. It will feel sort of dull and mechanical, but it's the only way the audience won't be thinking of stories for doujins every time they see a character with skin-tight clothes. One of the things Attack on Titan seemed to be doing right for a while was how it had both male and female characters to have very similar body shapes, as well as presenting women to be equally good fighters as men are. This was very uncommon for the average fighting shonen that makes women to have huge breasts, be far weaker than men, and constantly in need to be saved by them. Unfortunately, the way it presented the main heroine as constantly obsessed with the blunt protagonist made the whole thing fall back into the stereotyping, not to mention the military uniforms they are wearing, which although they normally have nothing to do with sexual stimulation, just because they were skin tight and with leather stripes made the wild imagination of the fans to think it is a bondage fetish. I once read an essay that was written by a Japanese reporter a few years after Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind was made. He focused a lot in how Miyazaki managed to make the heroine to trample traditional gender roles, a thing which was still very strong in Japan at the time the movie was made. He pointed out how Nausicaa was doing anything a boy protagonist would normally do in such stories, as well as how the baggy clothes she and most characters were wearing were successfully hiding their body figures, and thus allowing the audience to not automatically think of why doesn't this girl act like a girl? Let's also not overlook how sex sells, and the entertainment industry knows that all too well. That is why they make sure to throw in as much fan service as they can and still get away with it, in order to increase sales. Gender equality is in fact counterproductive there, since most people find entertainment in fiction by getting anything they can't in real life. That is why women have way too big breasts. That is why feminine boys are very interested in blunt, boring girls, or why the tomboy warrior woman quickly becomes an obedient housewife for our self-insert protagonist. The audience in a way wants characters to be objectified and chauvinistic because that is what makes them sexy, cool, cute, or easier to relate with. And that happens to be exactly what feminists are protesting about. What they basically want is the death of the mainstream entertainment industry, which is making a hell of a lot of money and pleases a hell of a lot of people. Thus it will not happen anytime soon. Some have suggested a sort of compromise. If you have both men and women being equally sexualized or objectified, a show won't hold a bias towards one gender and a bias against the other. But that won't work for most, since entertainment is all about being one-sided. Traditionally, men don't like to have gays in their guilty pleasures. In the same way, women don't like to have dynamic women in theirs. They want them to be stupid and frail and always having the hots for feminine bad boys. Don't ask why, they just do. And even if everybody agrees to compromise, the whole thing is still trash entertainment, so why even bother to keep the feminists pleased? It is supposed to be dumb escapism. Who cares about gender equality? What we can do is not to confuse sexualization with objectification. A character who has a backdrop story, a goal, and a personality that is not limited to two lines that are there just to differentiate him from 24 other characters who are doing the exact same thing is not an object, even if he is sexualized. Objectification is what you get in porn magazines or porn movies, which don't bother to have a plot other than fucky. In other words, a show like Kill la Kill is not objectifying its females for having a huge amount of fan service. I wouldn't go as far as saying it is about female empowerment or sexual liberation, but it sure is not about objectification, something which I cannot say about your average Idolmaster title. And to be honest, eventually the thing that separates good fiction from trashy fiction is the amount of subtlety and modesty, which allows the audience not to imagine fetishes every 10 seconds. A show can focus on whatever themes it is going for, only when it's not trying to ridicule itself. So if you want to make a point in a show, keep the bloody fan service to the bare minimum. If everybody's constantly acting like comical caricatures of ever horny gays and lesbians, the audience won't be able to take whatever message there is supposed to be there seriously. This is why that recent Mimimi short is nothing but objectification. Its message about escapism is lost under a ton of fan service and the lack of characterization. And it's not because it was a short feature and thus had no time to offer plot and characterization. House of Small Bricks is a short feature too, and yet it did wonders with the theme and the characters. Bottom line, sexualization is not going away anytime soon, but we can always not overlook what a character has to offer besides that. We can even use the volume of sexualization to evaluate the writing and the presentation of a title. The less sex appeal it has, the less distracting it is from whatever message it is going for.
Gen Z boss in a mini! Gen Z boss in a mini! Holy shit, what's going on with this diversity in Marvel everyone is raging about? And holy crap, why is everyone who made a video about Yuri on Ice get so many views and subscribers? I better tap into this shit while it's still hot. In recent years, the female gaze and male homosexuality have increased in volume. What used to be a community of mostly guys and their waifus is now slowly getting more and more gals and their husbandos. Something similar is happening in the Western comic book industry. What used to be a fan base of mostly white males reading comics about heterosexual white male superheroes is changing with the constant additions of female counterparts, non-white in race, and occasionally gay in sexual orientation. This is not something new, as there would usually be a token female or a token black guy in every team of heroes. It's just that they were always forced to be included for the sake of diversity by various politically correct groups, so the heroes wouldn't come off as gay because they have no platonic girlfriends, or racists for being all white. The thing is, most authors did not know what to do with them besides having them for the sake of having them. Thus they were treating them as very minor or useless, indirectly promoting the idea that they were inferior and achieving the exact opposite result of what they were going for. A completely balanced cast of all races and genders is promoting racial and gender stereotyping because it's an obvious artificially created team. The best chemistry always comes when the mix is seamless. And in order to do that, you need some sort of uniformity, which is not achieved by having 25% of males, females, gays and lesbians. Going back to diversity in recent times, it happens way more frequently and it's taken a bit more seriously. What used to be shallow yuri bait or yaoi bait is now treated with some substance. The characters are no longer empty husks representing archetypes, indistinguishable from each other across different titles. It's a nice push towards a society that is not xenophobic and narrow-minded when it comes to fiction, which is exactly where the problem lies with people complaining about it. Many anime fans are calling newer shows to be gay shit, and many comic book fans are calling newer comics to be social justice propaganda. Although they are correct up to a point, what triggers them to the most part is change. Traditionally, anime and comics were enjoyed mostly by male geeks, many of which fought an introvert, who were escaping the harsh reality of a society that made fun of them by self-inserting into muscular male superheroes saving the universe week after week. And for many decades that was a model that was working, an industry sustained mostly by geeks. This model is no longer working. The comic book industry collapsed under its own weight in the mid-90s, and the anime industry no longer sells as many manga because nobody's having babies and many read them online. They had to broaden their horizons and bring in fresh buyers, or they would go bankrupt. Thus, all the attempts of appealing to more than just male geeks of the same race. The more diversity they have, the more people will be interested. And that is why the core fanbase is complaining. They no longer get the same shit, it's no longer just heterosexual white males they can self-insert. In fact, by now, none of the classic Avengers is still there. They have all been replaced by new characters, many of which are not white or not male. As a very old fan myself, I know how hard it is to accept change. It took me a while to get used to the idea of most anime no longer be about mecha and spaceships after the 80s. Do you know how soul-crushing it was to know we would never get something in the likes of Macross ever again? Same thing about no longer getting well-made dark science fiction after the mid-00s. No more Neon Genesis, no more Serial Experiments Lane, no more Ghost in the Shell. Now it's mostly cute girls doing cute things and beta males being trapped in video games where everything constantly time resets. What is this? This is nothing remotely close to what originally brought me into the medium. For most of us old fans, it's the world changing and us refusing to change along with it. It's not what we are used to, and it's constantly moving further away from it. So if there is a moral message in this video, that would be make more videos about Yuri on Ice. It's gonna give you lots of views and subscribers.
Itty bitty titties and a bulb! Itty bitty titties and a bulb!
One of the laziest excuses many use for liking a show is the message it's promoting. The script can be bad, the presentation can be weak, the directing can be awful, but if the message is fine, then it's all fine. I am in favor of any show having a message. To hell with mystery baits which exist just to keep you watching without making a point and forcing the viewer to overthink or make up meanings of his own. The thing is, the message by itself is not enough. It has to be supported by good writing and presentation, or it will come off as hollow or stupid. Remember a few years back when a generic sports series was voted as the best anime in everything just because it had homosexuals? Guess what happened in Eurovision of 2018?
The contest has succumbed to social justice and political correct orthodoxy. The final Eurovision scoreboard isn't the most important result for him. He's proud his message of LGBT inclusivity has been spread around the world. So much for this being a song contest. What about the song?
And even if the message is well presented, it must still not be one-sided, because it will come off as propaganda instead of inspirational or motivational. Exactly what happened in Eurovision, which cared only about telling a message than bothering to be fair about it.
This feminist empowerment message went a little something like this.
Ouch.
Aren't you so glad that feminists banned hot grid girls and booth babes, and now they're telling us that the exact opposite of beauty is in fact beautiful?
Look at me, I'm a beautiful creature.
Legend of the Galactic Heroes is a very politically charged series with stellar presentation and explores both sides of the argument. That's why it's so good. Oh, and also because nobody in the production team made fun of other titles for not trying to be political.
So here's this clown. He writes...
Co-writes.
One Marvel movie, feels all puffed up from all the hype, and immediately starts inflicting his social justice warrior bullshit on us, passing judgment on, of all things, Iron Man. Think back to Tony Stark, him being douchey and being okay. If that character, Stark, was created in a movie today, I wonder if the response would be like, oh, it's cool that he's douchey and disrespectful to women, that's fine. I think we're at a different place. I think it's a better place.
Iron Man never tried to be political, and it still isn't, no matter how much they try to retroactively slap a message on it. As much as I was making fun of the older James Bond movies being chauvinistic, they only felt like that with today's standards. For the time they were made, they were no more than cheap empowerment fantasy with flat characters. Messages are fine, but they are not everything. Sometimes a dumb action flick is a dumb action flick, and forcefully making a big fuss out of its supposed messages as means to make it seem like it's more than what it is, leads to overthinking nobody should be proud of.
You cannot possibly understand the full appeal of K-On! Just by watching the first episode.
Before feminism was a thing, women had no rights and were dependent on men in order to survive because they couldn't be given money or property without being married. As for men, they also had to get married even if they could support themselves financially. There wasn't much healthcare before the 20th century. If you got sick or too old to work, you needed someone to take care of you. You couldn't depend on the neighbors all the time to come help you. You needed a wife for that. And strong sons to be working in the fields or continue the dynasty if you were a noble. Or pretty daughters you could marry off to strong men who could help you out since you were their father-in-law, That's why pretty much everybody was getting married back then and divorces were out of the question. And then feminism came along and had a few simple demands. Women should be allowed to vote and own property instead of being treated as property, wink wink. Then women get what they wanted and life went on. Worse than before. So what if they can vote now? This doesn't change the outcome of any elections, since all of them have to vote the same party as their husbands. Because remember, women can't work yet, so disobeying the men by supporting someone else would be like biting the hand that feeds them. And even if they own their own property, this still doesn't change anything, since they still need a man to work and pay the bills for said property. Thus, the only thing the first wave of feminism managed to achieve was to double the number of voters, and making the procedure of voting far more time-consuming without ever changing the outcome. Well done, independent women, for making it harder for democracy to work. Then came the second wave of feminism, which was allowing women to work. To be honest, women were always working, either as housewives or by helping out their husbands in family businesses. They were just not paid for it, since the reward was limited to not getting kicked out in the streets for disobeying the man of the house. Working in this context was about going outside the house and providing services for a non-family business, which at the time was ridiculous for most men, since why would you marry a woman if she was leaving the house to go see other men and help out in businesses other than your own? Sounds like you married a whore, doesn't it? And it actually was for many women, especially in the fields of modeling and film production. Almost every famous model and actress you know of was selling her body to rich and famous men to get where she is now. Well done, independent women, selling your body for a job instead of being faithful and loving to your husbands. Oh, that's right, now get paid. You don't need to get married. That's what equality is all about. But to be honest, the second wave of feminism had its good side. Allowing women to work doubles the potential workforce of a society, which in turn doubles production without the need to hire foreign workers for something your own fellow countrymen can do. It boosts the economy, since the money local women are making stay in the country, as opposed to most of the money foreigners are making and send away to feed their families in other countries, thus weakening the economy. And that's the end of the positives, since feminism ruined the nuclear family. If women can make their own money, they don't need a man, therefore marriage is no longer a first priority. Less people get married and more women get a divorce because they don't need men anymore, they are independent. So independent they get half of everything when they divorce, while also forcing the man to pay for the expenses of raising the children. And then came the third wave of feminism, from where all the memes come from. Almost all of them are self-entitled millennials, spoiled man-children, products of a society without war and fragmented nuclear family values. When both parents are working, or even worse, are divorced, children don't see their mama and papa too much and feel neglected. Then their parents, who can't spend that much time with them, often try to win them over by simply buying them anything they want and complying with almost all of their silly demands. This makes children spoiled. If they take the extra mile and keep telling them they are special snowflakes who can do anything they want in life, because unlike their parents' generation there are no wars, therefore they are free to do anything, said children grow up with unreasonable expectations. Which is why they become easily offended and yell like idiots in the middle of huge crowds when they are no longer getting what they want as easily as they used to. This becomes a bigger problem when women consider the source of their failure to be chauvinistic white male privileges. That's why they can't get a job instantly, it's white men who have a job. That's why they can't get promoted from bottom-tier clerics to presidents of multi-million companies in a month, it's those darn white males. Every time they don't get what they want, they just yell about being offended by sexual harassment and sexism. You can't imagine what a hell on earth any workplace becomes when men spend more time arguing with women over privileges than doing the job they're being paid for. Especially when most of the so-called sexual harassment is naturally occurring sexual attraction. When you're a normal man close to a normal woman, there is bound to be some sexual interest. It's the instinct of procreation all living creatures have since life began on this planet billions of years ago. But when you are not allowed to express your sexual interest, because it will be labeled harassment, this creates a lot of frustration. Even for the women who are yelling harassment every time a man is looking at them with a lustful gaze, when they are otherwise showing off their goods with revealing clothes. They complain about being wanted by men, which is what normally should make them feel great, while being dressed in a way that is supposed to make them wanted. Do you spot the contradiction? That's the problem with third wave feminists. They take the whole having a career fuss way too seriously. They are against marriage in favor of working. Because for some reason you cannot be an independent woman if you are not working, although this means you are not a woman at all since you are not raising a family. This brings us to the fourth and most recent wave, where feminists realize the problem with working women is that they are women. They keep trying to eradicate the wage gap so they can be paid as much as men, and the only thing they figure out is that they don't deserve to be paid the same since they cannot be as efficient as men. They have less muscle mass, which makes them not as good as men at manual labor, and even when it comes to office work, which is not dependent on muscles to get things done, they are still not as efficient since they take a lot of leaves during pregnancy or are going through PMS. Thus for them, the solution to gender equality became the eradication of genders. If everyone becomes trans and gets drugs that halt hormone growth at puberty, then everyone will look like a weird hermaphrodite monstrosity by the time they are adults. Problem solved! We will all be freaks of nature, not defined by what we were naturally born to be. Isn't equality wonderful? Also, as much as we're making fun of men choosing to have cyber sex with some waifu instead of getting an actual girlfriend, can you really blame them when real women have become inapproachable? I mean, what are your choices these days if you're a man? Go out and court some girl who doesn't want to be in a relationship because she wants to work and men are all sexual predators, thus they offend her when they try to court her and need to be humiliated in every social media so their lives will be destroyed forever for doing something every normal man is doing since the dawn of time? Can you blame a man if he doesn't want that shit and instead wears a VR helmet and goes to have sex with fictional women who love him no matter what he says or does to them? Beta male losers who want to escape reality, the fad of isekais, sex bots, and booby mouse pads, and VR waifus. All these are the result of feminism and uncontrollable progress of technology and bad parenthood. And these were my views on feminism. The truth has been spoken. The guy who gender swapped the Saint Seiya characters got a lot of shit for it, and when he was asked to explain why, it came down to him having to do it because we can't have a boys-only team in 2018. We need cute girls in sailor suits, otherwise nobody's going to like it. And now nobody likes it anyways. Basically, it was a failed attempt at updating an older title by including diversity, even if it made no sense. First of all, changing things as time goes on is something that happens with every story. When you have different people remaking an old title with a different approach and aimed at a different generation with different ideologies, things are bound to change by default. You can't keep everything the same because lots of things don't sound right now as they did some decades ago.
スパイダーマンはこのまま少年と共に人々の前から姿を消したかった。しかし、それは許されない。少年もまた同じ思いであった。
What?
Though there are things that must never change if they are part of the main hook. Details can shuffle around their meaning and ass-pulls can be happening every 5 minutes. There's not gonna be much of a problem if they are not clashing with the core appeal of something. The producer who did the gender swap in Saint Seiya defended himself by mentioning the same thing happening with Starbuck in the reboot of Battleship Galactica. Nobody complained about that. The thing is, people didn't mind that gender swap because it wasn't the main reason they were watching Galactica. The gender of Starbuck was not part of the main appeal, it was not the main hook, and in the long run it didn't contradict something. The gender swap in Saint Seiya clashes a lot with what people liked about the show. The appeal was always boys in armors fighting other boys in armors. It was an empowerment fantasy for a boys-only club, to the point they went as far as establishing women always wear a mask so they will be even less humane and relatable. Omega was actually the first to make major changes, and it was also one of the various reasons people didn't like it either. A girl to the main team and not wearing a mask all the time was clashing with the core appeal. And they even gave her a miniskirt, Zetai Ryuki, and what appears to be garters. That shit had no practical purpose on the armor. They were plain sexualization in a show that didn't had it up to that point. It sounds like it was unimportant and that the fanboys were complaining over nothing, but down to it, it's the exact same reason that leads to nitpicking. If something is messing with your enjoyment, it doesn't matter how small and unimportant it's going to be. You're going to use that excuse regardless.
Even when he returned later that year to come out as a lesbian-identified male, intersex, and cross-dressing tranny who still detested homosexual men, his delusions seemed to have not left him, as he had begun to campaign against Sonic's arms being changed from a flesh tone to blue in the franchise's most recent game, Sonic Boom.
And let's make something clear. There are shows that have changed tremendously in a few years by the original creator while still aimed at the exact same audience, and there was hardly that much drama caused by it compared to a simple gender swap. Partly because the original creator can get away with it no matter what he does, and partly because the audience didn't care about all the bullshit that were constantly devolving the quality of what they were in love with. As long as it wasn't clashing with what they liked about it, they would be eternally satisfied, even if the last part of a show had nothing in common with how it began.
Finding hollows was a key part of the theme, and the tension came from seeing whether the characters could overcome their personal grief, for which the hollows were a metaphor. But Ichigo has just comfortably kicked the ass of the ultimate uber hollow, so there's no tension anymore in just having him fight regular hollows. We know he can beat them, it's not a plausible challenge anymore. So what do you do to keep the story interesting? And the answer Bleach comes up with is, well, I guess he needs to fight something else now, because hollows aren't fun anymore. And so we get the Soul Society arc, and now it's a bunch of Shinigami fighting each other and training montages and more Shinigami fights, and now it's Arankars and Visards and Fullbringers and Quincy's, and none of it has anything to do with the original theme that made the story interesting in the first place.
I want to see some damn Bankais, goddammit.
Wonder Egg Priority is not the picturesque reality that we hope it would be. Sadly, there was a crowd of different issues that began to pop up with obvious budget constraints, the overworking of their employees, and a clear lack of ending narrative set up for the story, while mixed with a cohort of different ideas, the story doesn't make sense, fell so far flat on its face, was lackluster in its delivery. This series simply didn't stick its landing. I don't know if they simply wanted this to be the plan, but had no actual way of ending it, because they realized that they had a better product than they could imagine ending. However, by no means am I calling Wonder Egg Priority a bad series. Wonder Egg Priority is quite definitely a show about wonder, eggs, and priorities. This series was incredible start to finish, with representation of being transgender, being misgendered, and representation of suicide. Incredibly magnificent representations of what it's like to be a trans person and being discriminated against and treated by other people like the gender you don't want to be identified as. Such a powerful message. I love how they explore these topics, becoming a gay person, a transgender person, and a whole bunch more that reinforce the ideas like LGBTQ+, and more. You're okay, this is normal, you aren't alone. Visual symbolism and powerful representation of self-harm, suicide, depression, and a whole cohort of other serious topics. This final conclusion doesn't take away from the rest of the messages put into this show by the clearly creative authors that were behind it, that wanted to send important messages like LGBTQ inclusivity. Wonder Egg Priority was and always will be a great representation.
In this latest example of forced inclusion and equality, someone was asking why aren't there more capable women in shonen when it's apparently not that hard to be depicted properly. All the writers have to do is to treat them like men and not like props. This demand is ridiculous. Why would you expect to see better representation of women in a shonen series? It's aimed at boys who want to identify with other boys, who kick the crap out of other boys and get a whole bunch of objectified waifus for their harem. You think they give a shit about proper representation? Would you have the same demand in a porn game? Would you want to see Rance getting ass-fucked by a fat ugly woman for the sake of treating them as equal to him? Of course not! You are playing Rance so you can sexually assault every beautiful woman in the game without ever feeling guilty about it. Because that is what the game was made for. It's what the demographic of such games expects to see. I had a chat with a person who made the topic, and the replies it gave revealed the problem with the logic it was following. It assumed that there is nothing bad with having women or gays or any other type of queers in fiction that don't come off as cartoony representations that misrepresent what they are about. A thing which is dumb to expect in a shonen from the get-go. Why? Because everything there is a cartoony representation. Why would you expect realism or equality in a series where even the main characters are exaggerated stereotypes, with usually not even 2 dimensions in their personality? It cannot happen in any shonen by default. Can it happen in more mature series? Yes, it can, but then you have to take into account what kind of a demographic such a show would have. The vast majority of people don't expect their fiction to be fair or balanced. They expect it to be a lot of what they like and very little of what they don't like. Therefore, a show with realistic or balanced representation won't have much of a support, since it would be boring fiction for most. What kind of a conflict can there be if everyone is treated fairly and as an equal? Let me give you a very broad example. Imagine a communistic utopia where everyone is equal. Women are as capable as men, students are as capable as teachers, workers are as capable as supervisors, and so on. Where would the incentive be for doing anything in such a world? Why would you get up in the morning if nothing will come out of it? You are equal no matter what you are or what you do, so what's the point in trying to get better? Something many have a very hard time to accept is that inequality does not exist simply because our world is evil and nothing is fair. It exists so it will be motivating us to get better at something. To be the best student in class, or the employee of the month, or the king of the pirates. The reason you want to get rich is so you will be able to do things poor people cannot. The reason you want to buy a sports car is so you can impress women more than your friends who don't have a sports car. The reason you want to buy a boat is so you can make your neighbor jealous for not having a boat. Inequality gives birth to desires and motivates you to get up every morning. But you're not gonna get any of that if you have the exact same things as everyone else and you can never get more. The same logic applies to fiction. Imagine a fighting shonen which has exactly 50% men and women, where the women win exactly 50% of the time, and where the main characters lose exactly 50% of the time. Also imagine none of them gains anything from their victory because they are equal in everything and always get the same reward regardless of winning or losing. It wouldn't be much of a fighting shonen, would it be now? No, you wanna see the 14-year-old underdog kicking the crap out of all the men and getting all the hot women for himself. The same thing you want in your real life. You wanna be the most successful, to have the car and the boat and the women, so you can brag about to the others about not having all that. Good luck doing that if everyone of every gender, of every race and of every age is as good at something as you are. If you live in such a society, you can be the best in something only by complete chance. And who would want that when there is no merit in what you are doing? Also, who would want to watch a show where women are fully fleshed out and feel like actual people, while men are one-dimensional cartoons that all they do is fighting? Because that is what this person expects from shonen, and is never gonna get it because it's stupid!
5'3" and an attitude! 5'3" and an attitude!
I got a few defenders of gay representation in my video about it, and I am here to tell you why they are full of shit. They keep on saying just because it has gays it doesn't mean it has to be sexual, when by default it's about sexual preferences, so it can be nothing else besides being sexual.
Oh hey girl! That's my job, daddy.
And the issue is not about having gays in series, it's about having them in shows aimed at children who are not supposed to be interested in sex yet. And even if some of them are, they shouldn't be interested in sexual deviance. And yes, it is a sexual deviance, no matter how much they try to normalize it. If it's not between a man and a woman, it deviates from the norm, so it's deviant. And children shouldn't be interested in deviant sex before they even understand what normal sex is. Also, anyone who insists all these queers want is to be represented is a big liar. They don't simply want gays in series for children, they also want them to be the main characters and to be constantly parading how gay they are, to the point they overshadow everything else.
We're the first queer agents in the field ever.
Which is exactly what happened with Shira. Her lesbian relationship completely overshadowed the plot, which, if you remember, was something about magic swords and planetary invasions by a galactic empire.
My little butthole went boop!
You don't remember those, do you? No, you just remember lesbians in a cartoon aimed at children, constantly parading how gay they are, for making children curious in deviant sex at an age when they shouldn't be. That way they can trick them to pump their bodies with hormones and mutilate their sexual organs, so they can turn them into grotesque freaks that will commit suicide in their 30s.
Thank God for you, drag queen.
Thank God for every drag queen, but not actually.
So yes, having gays in fiction is all about sex, since that is the only thing they can be about, and it is wrong to have it in shows aimed at children, since nothing good will come out of it. And if you disagree with that, please leave a message with what you assume to be a positive effect on the psychology of children.
You can't pander to the gays, they can smell it. You're acting like Citibank at Pride.
This show has been getting a lot of praise and Tumblr cred from its inclusion of LGBT characters in the story, which I am 100% down for. This show is made for kids, and the younger they learn about stuff like this, the better off we will all be. That said, I do have a complaint. While there are LGBT characters in the show, they are limited to side characters or people with limited screen time. If you want to have gay characters, that's great, but don't show them only to hide or kill them off. They deserve to be front and center, just like the rest of the cast.
Every cartoon deserves to have gay main characters who will be teaching little boys how to f*** other little boys at the age of 5. And it's all normal, there's nothing wrong with it, because it's fiction. Nobody gets hurt because it's not real. No sir, it's just little boys learning how to f*** other little boys at the age of 5. There's nothing wrong about that. We all need gay heroes in main positions. Please, all the time, please!
People on Twitter are claiming that a new playable character for Guilty Gear Strive is in fact trans. Now their evidence for this is, well, mostly headcanon. Elfie and Bridget literally make the trans flag in exploiting bot systems on Twitter. If you mention this character by name, you'll be spammed by bots claiming that Elfelt is trans. Female profile pictures containing the same message, there's dozens of these, and they all say the same thing, saying Elfelt is trans. Cry about it, MAGA. Now, of course, I think they're referring MAGA as Make America Great Again. They're basically claiming that if you mention this character or don't confirm that it's trans, you're somehow a Trump supporter or conservative, which is very interesting to see how someone can be labeled that based on their view of a video game character. Their only proof of Elphel is a color scheme when combined with Bridget, and also people spamming bot replies under tweets talking about the character. That's the proof people are going with. This account right here is quoting them, saying that the franchise is dead, gaming-wise. Pandering to people on places like Twitter is more important than the actual gameplay and the story and things like that. It's sad that this is all this character has been reduced to. Seriously, whenever I go and find this character, this is all they bring up about him, not his gameplay, his moveset, or his design, or story, or anything else, just this meaningless crap. The trans game, in quotes. Talk about a reduction of years of storytelling and cool fighting game mechanics boiled down to one character. If my life's work was reduced to the black story, I would shoot myself. Bridget is that he's trans and that's it, and that's literally all Bridget's character is now, just a tool to get other LGBT to use as a mascot and not as a character. Has anyone talked about this game like a normal human being? No, they have not. There's never been a normal discussion about this game in at least a year at this point. There's still Bridget trans debates, people attacking others over it, and it's sad to see Guilty Gear Strive once again only being talked about because of Twitter trying to claim a character as trans, and in this case, it is a very wild assumption to make when there is virtually nothing to suggest that that character is. Trying to force a character to be a certain way based on your headcanon because you want to stick it to people that, the chuds on Twitter or something like that. It's embarrassing. Go make original characters instead of trying to force existing ones to fit your headcanon because it makes you feel powerful on social media. And of course, someone's going to screenshot this video and go to Twitter and say that I'm transphobic or something like they always do.